Hello and welcome to Instagram. We're going to do an Instagram live this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, or even this evening. So hopefully we're going to link up with a fantastic person who I am acting as mentor, activator, you name it. We are in this together. And she is an excellent individual that I cannot wait to introduce you to. So fingers crossed is if by magic she's going to pop up in a moment's time, and we are going to have a really nice chat about her life, how she got into motorsport, and maybe give you some tips about how you can get into motorsport as well. Hey, there she is. Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Nabila, I think it's best if you kind of describe a little bit about who you are and what you do and why your story is fascinating.
So it's always funny when people say that you have such a fascinating story, because as yourself, you really don't necessarily think that. But so I'm a rally driver. I started competing around 5 years ago now. No, 6 years ago. God, where does time go? And I come from a motorsport background. I have my grandfather and my father both competed, so third generation going strong, which is really nice. And I tried a car at the age of 16 and fell in love with it, and realized at that moment that that's what I had to do, and then made sure I did everything in my power to make that happen. And it's been a tough few years. I mean, I've been through ups and downs. I had an injury in one of my first accidents that took me out for a couple of months, and then I got back in the car again, carried on going, and then it went really, really well. I've competed all over Britain. I've competed in Europe. I've done a cup in Spain and Portugal, which was really fun too. And I've also had the chance to compete on some WRC events in the privateer class, which has been amazing. And then really life's just stemmed on from there.
Now, it's okay. It's one thing having, grandparents, parents who are into motorsport, who love it, and, getting a thirst for wanting to drive. But it's quite another thing to turn that into actually having your name up there in lights as a competitor during rallying. So how did you make it happen?
So I was very lucky with my dad having been in rallying and done some competing in the UK himself. He had a lot of ideas, and also was able to help navigate me into the right areas. So I started out in single venues and tried to get my license grade, and then we decided, because you've got to remember, I started when I was a lot older than everybody else. So I was 21 when I started competing, which is a lot older than the average person who's going to start rallying. And then that meant that I had to kind of play catch up a lot. So I ended up going into the British Championship in 2016 and kind of learning as I was doing. So it was all a baptism of fire, but I think I kind of learned and coped with all of that as it came at me, which was quite nice. And I was very lucky that I had a good team around me that year. I had a strong car, and I just had really good support. So that's how I managed it. And I was very lucky that I was able to raise sponsorship, because it's quite a difficult thing to do. But my dad, being in business, helped me to talk to the right people and have the conversations I needed to have in order to be able to gain sponsorship to compete. So
Can I ask a cheeky
lucky.
question?
Yes.
So when I did an interview with Daniel Ricciardo, I think it was his first year in Formula One, and I said to him, so roughly how much does it cost to kind of get to this point? And the figures were staggering. So can I ask, how much do you think it takes to get yourself into the opening level of rallying?
So if you're starting at single venues, you can do it for cheap. Like I bought my car for £2,000 with parts and tires and everything included. And then I went on, and the entry fees aren't terrible. It's fairly expensive, but they're around, I can't remember exactly because this was a few years ago, but I'm going to go between 300, they're either between 200 and 400, but I can't remember exactly. So please don't hold me to that. And then I worked with literally just one mechanic on those events. And I worked with a co-driver that was happy to sit with me without paying, like without me having to pay. So that's how I first got into it and started out in that level. And then I just got very lucky in the sense of I sold that car and was able to put money down to finance my next car. And then I'd worked through uni and I had savings and things like that. And then I was able to work with sponsors to be able to pay. So my first year probably cost me around 30,000 all in a Ford Fiesta and the BRC. So it's not cheap. And that is a big problem with motorsports, I think. Like, they don't create the biggest level of access with how much it costs. And I think a lot of it does stem down to kind of luck and how you work and get yourself there. But sometimes you just happen to luck out and be in the correct position at the correct time and things happen for you. And sometimes it's a lot more difficult than that. And you're sat there wondering, like, how am I meant to figure this out? I mean, my years didn't include damage costs. Like, at the end of that, like, I had to put my money into that, and I'm lucky that Dad helped me out. So I've been extremely lucky.
Well, lucky slash talent.
Yeah, bit of both. In my first year when I crashed, maybe I thought maybe I didn't have the talent there, but you know, they do say if you're not crashing, you're not trying hard enough. So it is part and parcel of the game.
No, exactly. So I'm fascinated to know, who were your role models when you were growing up? Because everybody talks about, you know, you need to see it to be it, to believe it, that you can make it happen to you. But even for me growing up, there weren't a huge amount of females out there driving or riding. And I can imagine a female wanting to get into it when you were starting. You didn't have Michelle Mouton driving around. So who could you look up to, who inspired you?
I think that was exactly it. There wasn't female role models. And I remember as a kid, especially, like, I joked around saying I wanted to be a racing driver. My two dream jobs as a kid was either being a spy or being a racing driver. And so
Obviously.
I wanted to, yeah, I mean, there's logical things to do, you know? And I always joked around, and my parents always found it quite funny. And I actually remember we were asked to do, like, we had to write an essay on it when I was at school on, like, what you wanted to do. And those kind of the two things that I wanted to do. But it was actually easier at that point when I did all the research. I was like, well, it actually makes more sense to become a spy than it does a racing driver, because I don't see any women actually doing it. So I never did any karting or anything like that. And even though I came from that motorsport background, Dad never considered putting me into karting or anything because we'd not seen it. But definitely, I think Michelle Mouton was a big role model. And then I got the chance to meet Molly Taylor back in probably around 2015. And she was the first one that was doing it that I'd properly seen. And that was incredible. And she's such a nice person. So we had a chat, and she was telling me how she got into it. And she started out in Australia and then worked her way over to Europe, and how difficult it had been for her. But she was the first person I looked at and went, she's doing it now, so why can't I? And then, of course, you look at all the WRC drivers, and they're all great role models. You look at, and they're all different in many ways, like how Tanak's style is different, his personality is different, and then you've got Sebastian Loeb and Sebastian Ogier. So I always had a little piece almost that I admired about all the different people, and then kind of put that together in one big role model.
That sounds amazing. And to have that kind of clarity of thought, you obviously knew you wanted to do something that was quite adventurous, something that was exciting. If it wasn't going to be a spy, then rally driving. Do you think things are very different now to when you started when it comes to role models?
I think so. I think that it is and it isn't, I guess. I think what's amazing about now is that there are so many more role models that you can look at and young girls can aspire to be. And with the W Series, with Extreme E having female lineup in there, with rallying having more of a presence of females all over Europe, I do think there are definitely more and more role models coming along that can encourage that next generation of young girls who may look at it and go, well, that's just a bit scary trying to enter into that world. But now they can see that there is that opportunity. So that's really nice as well. And I guess there'll always be role models no matter what. I don't necessarily think if you have a dream and you see someone doing it, I feel like obviously it's easier if you see a female versus a male doing it and you're female. But I think you'll find a role model in anyone if you want to find one. So I think there's that as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Now, you and I got to know each other through the Unlocked programme, which is all part of the Women's Sports Trust, trying to, I suppose, unlock the potential of people like you, athletes who have kind of a lot of things they want to achieve and aspire towards. So what are your hopes at the moment when it comes to kind of the wider motorsport? Because that's, I think, one of the main subjects that I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah, so I was very lucky to apply to the Women's Sports Trust program and get accepted, and it's been an incredible year. And I've learned so much from everybody that I've worked with and talked to, and it's absolutely incredible. It's the best opportunity I could have had. And with regards to what I've always thought about and things that I wanted to work on, obviously I wanted to develop myself as an athlete and person and be able to put myself in the best situation I could possibly put myself in. And with the help and guidance and meeting you and creating new networks and things like that, I have been able to. But one of the things going into it was definitely talking about and thinking about grassroots motorsport. I don't think that there's enough at the moment in grassroots motorsport, and that's something that I would really like to help work on and change and create that kind of entry level and break away the barrier slightly. So both for females, ethnic minorities, and well, everybody really, because it's not only just the cost to enter, but as you say, people look at it and it's scary. If you look at the numbers, it is terrifying. And there's trying to figure out a way of how to encourage those young school kids almost, that motorsport is a viable career option and motorsport's there for you. And you don't just have to be a driver or a co-driver. There's everything in between. I mean, you do commentary, you do presenting, you do radio, and then there's also mechanics, engineers, the actual team that runs it. I mean, business people are needed in motorsport. So I think there needs to be education at a lower level, because if you look at daily school, when you think of sports, the sports that are talked about, you play football, you play basketball, well, maybe now, maybe I'm thinking about here, but you play like rugby and all of the sports that are there and thereabouts, and you see those. So as a child, you can look at those and go, oh yeah, I can do this because I'm playing it now. Motorsports isn't really one of those things you can throw in and say, we're going to have motorsports in school. It's just not going to happen. But if
what a shame. I'd sign up for that.
It'd be awesome, you know, if a school could have a go-karting track, why not? But there's that, you have to find that way of talking about it and discussing it with those younger kids, so they look at it and go, yeah, no, I do want to go into karting and I do want to see what I can do and be in that world of sport. And I mean, there must be young girls and boys that sit there that have that intelligence in their minds. They want to be an engineer or a mechanic and things like that. So that's just the kind of thing I'm definitely keen on trying to do, is work a way to create the inclusion and the discussion of motorsports.
I mean, obviously, Lewis Hamilton has stepped up massively and decided that he wants to put down diversity as a talking point and really start to mix things up in the paddock, which has been a long time coming, and it's fantastic he's started to do that. But it's going to be a slow path. It's the same with greater diversity of females coming into paddocks. What were your experiences like? Because obviously there aren't a huge plethora of Asian females coming through any route. And rallying, I suppose, is the same as every other motorsport.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny. When I first started out, and I must be naive, but I never really noticed, especially growing up where I grew up, that I was coloured, if that makes sense. I kind of just felt like a person. I was very lucky. I wasn't treated any differently at school. I wasn't treated any differently by friends. And then I moved to the US, again, same thing. I did my last year of high school here. I then went to university, and that was all very open and highly international school I went to. So again, there was more people of colour. So I kind of just grew up not really thinking about anything else. And then I started competing, and you would kind of not really look into it, but then you would kind of look around and you'd be like, wow, my parents and I are the only people of colour in a service park. And then when I started going to Europe, it was exactly the same thing. And I was like, hold on a second, there's something wrong here. And I remember it clicked when I was sat in a awards dinner. I was the only person of colour in the room. And you kind of sit there and go, what is going on? Like, why is that a thing? And then I did over the years have discussions with people and talk to people and realize that they don't necessarily fit certain brand images either, because I do live in the UK. I am different. I am female as well. So I was like, wow, okay, this is a bit of an eye opener. And I slowly started to understand the idea of what people talked about, unconscious bias. And it's a really strange thing, because not growing up experiencing it and then realizing it when you're almost the age of 24 is kind of crazy. And you do feel a bit, well, yeah, as I said, naive. And you kind of sit there and go, well, actually, hold on, why is this? Like, so then I started to look into things, and I started to think about, like, why could all of this be? And then it was, I think, it's on both levels. As people were talking about, like, We Race as One, the Black Lives Matter movement, all of these things have talked about the fact that there are still these discrepancies between people that shouldn't be there. So I think 50% of it is that, and 50% of it is also, I think, down to cultural differences. I mean, my parents still get asked today by people in our community, like, how do you let your daughter compete? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, how is sport a viable option? How did you let her go into something so dangerous? I mean, there's all the questions. And you kind of sit there and go, my parents explained it to me in a really good way. Like, their parents had to work really hard for what they got, and then the next generation needed to be smarter and have worked harder and had better education than their generation before that, and it carries on. So the logical things, when you become better educated, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor. Those are just kind of the normal things. So when someone like me comes in and goes, I don't want that, I want to race, or I want to rally, and I want to work in sports, you're kind of looked at almost like you're a little bit crazy. So I definitely think it's that kind of two-pronged thing, where it's half of what society's created, but half of what people have grown up within their own cultures as well.
And one of the things when we first sat down and had a chat, you said to me was, I'd love to try and get more diverse roster of people coming into motorsport. And as you say, it doesn't matter whether that's as a mechanic, an engineer, a driver, a journalist. How can we go about making that happen? How can we go about making a change?
So I've been lucky enough, like, over the last year, to be able to talk to different people and see the different things that we can do. And a lot of people are trying to do the research now, and it does come down to, a lot of the times, it does come down to funding. A lot of people from ethnic minority backgrounds don't necessarily have the funding. And again, I'm going to say this is a gross stereotype thing, but usually that is the case. And then you look at it, and it's not like motorsports isn't massive in Kenya. Like, motorsports is huge out there. There's a massive amount of people who, like, obviously diversity from all different countries. You've got Saudi with a massive rallying, like, outfit over there, and you've got, well, Middle East, I should have said Middle East, and also Asia as well. And I think the problem is we don't necessarily cross it as much. People kind of stay in their own countries to compete, and they don't necessarily try to move out, because they don't see many people from those areas moving out into Europe and trying to get onto the international scale. It's kind of, they close themselves off to that space particularly. And so I think if we can start to work to create that cross flow of people, whether it's, I think, again, it all starts down in either grassroots or creating programs, and the ability for these people to apply for those, to come and create that level of diversity. But also within the UK, if there are those programs and people are seeing different role models and things like that, it will click for them. And I know, especially in my community, like, I've talked about it a few times, and I have had a lot of people approach me. They may not necessarily be interested in motorsport, but they're interested in sport. And it's all sports that need to kind of work on and build that sense of greater diversity within them. So it's nice to be able to talk to them, and they're like, well, I'm interested in playing table tennis at a super high level. Like, I'm working really hard, I'm doing really well, I'm at regional level, but I just don't know how to take that step up. And so if we can create that kind of environment where we can encourage these young kids or people to take that step up, maybe we'll be able to increase the diversity eventually. But as I've been talking to other people, it's not going to be something that changes overnight. It is going to take time. But I'm one of those people, I want to do it today and now.
Yeah, I think we're driven, we're motivated.
Yeah.
We want to try and change the world, as you say,
Yeah.
right now. It's not always as easy to do that as we would like it to be. But you are based out in America at the moment, much to Essex's dismay, I would have to say. Rally plans for the future. Do you know if you're going to get back in a car anytime soon? What's it like out there in America in the rally scene? Because it's very different from here.
Yeah, it is. So I've never actually competed in the American Championship. I know little bits about it and I've seen the events, but it's always been one of those things that I'm going to do the American Championship. I'm going to do the American Championship. And then it kind of falls to the wayside almost. So this year, the idea was I was going to be in ERC. I was going to come back to Europe. Really, the only reason so the reason I came out to the US was because of COVID. I wasn't racing. I needed to try and find something else to do. So I was like, I'll go get my realtor's license because why not? It was kind of one of those things. I needed to earn some money on the side as well. And it made logical sense because I was like, I need to find the most flexible career possible where I can still compete. And then like, if I need to switch back to doing something, I'll have this as like on the side. And then obviously I went to Poland. I had my accident and that took me out for, well, the season because it meant that I now needed to go check into what the problems were with my eyes and things like that. So I'm hoping I can get back into a car next year. Like I'm banking cards on that. I have to find out whether it's viable, like whether or not the doctors think it's safe to do so. Because at the end of the day, I think what I have, the condition thing that I have is something that's going to be with me forever. And we've kind of deciphered if I do have another role, it's likely that I can lose more of my eyesight. So it's now finding that kind of like risk reward. And obviously being a driver and being in rallying, the first thing I want to do is get back out into a rally car because that's what I know, that's what I want to do. So I'm kind of sat there. The first time it happened, I was like, no, I'm going back. And I did it for 6 years. So you kind of sit there and go, well, if we're taking it on that, maybe I have another 6 years. So I'm hoping that I can get back in a rally car, but I don't want to ever lose the ties that I have with motorsport. So I do want to find other options as well.
Yeah, because we've been speaking, haven't we, about maybe going into team management or driver coaching. There's so many opportunities where you could actually go and do some real good to people who are trying to come up into the world of motorsport and rallying.
Yeah,
Do
I
you?
think, sorry, carry on.
No, you go. I was just going to say, is that something you're seriously going to think about for the future? Because you never know
Definitely.
who's watching.
I know. So I definitely do want to consider working with a team or team management and things like that. Like I did a business degree. I'll always be interested in how a team runs and how we can make it run more efficiently, how we can make sure that the drivers have everything they need, obviously coming from that driver background. But also in the sense of like, I'd like to be able to work with people to develop them to where they want to get to. I remember when I first started rallying, there were so many things that I didn't even think I would need to be able to do. I mean, I was going to drive and I was going to compete. So why did I need to worry about my social media? Why did I need to worry about if I could do an interview? Why did I need to worry about literally anything of that kind of remit? Because at the end of the day, when you're thinking sports, that's not the first thing that comes into your head. But I wish I'd kind of had that guidance when I first started out, that those type of things are really important because they can set you on the back foot. And I know I talk to people today and I talk to marketing agencies in order to be able to increase sponsorship and things like that. And they go, well, you have everything, like, but you just don't have the social media following. And you sort of sit there and go, God, since when did a number become a thing? Like, why is a number so important these days? And so if I can help guide and create that kind of path and understanding for those younger drivers and kind of teach them kind of the ropes, because I do wish I had someone when I was starting out. I mean, I had my dad, but my dad didn't have to deal with any of that. Social media didn't exist in his time. He's like, well, you're competing. Why do you need to worry about media? And I'm like, I know, I don't know why I have to worry about it, but we are in that kind of environment now that is important. So yeah, there's definitely all of those things that I would like to venture into and see if I could do. And I mean, I would love to sit there and like work my way up into running Hyundai or Toyota. And you look at Jari Matti Latvala, I mean, that's inspiring. And Tommy Mäkinen, and they did it. So, I mean, okay, I'm not putting myself in the class of driver that they were, because they were fantastic, fantastic top level drivers. But I would definitely be interested in trying to do that in the future.
If anyone, by the way, has any questions for Nabila, then do get in touch. You can either put them on the comments, or there's a little question mark there as well. So feel free to ask away anything you have, and I'll act as mediator. But in the meantime, Nabila, when it comes to, I suppose, trying to appeal to the next generation of young girls coming through, no matter what their background, that's where we're falling short at the moment, isn't it? Just not getting bums on seats. You didn't kart. Do you wish you had?
100%. I mean, both my parents and I look back and go, I wish we'd known. It's always that what if / I wish we'd known. Had we known that, you know, this could have been a thing, I would definitely have tried to get myself into karting, because all of those things were going to be beneficial to create the skill level earlier on that could have put me in a completely different position than I am now. And I wouldn't have had to play catch up and like learn as I'm doing. I would have kind of had that and been in that kind of more fortunate position almost. And I do think that those kinds of things, I mean, hindsight, it's always one of those things you wish you had, but I don't think I would change it, because it definitely taught me the importance of never giving up, realizing that failures are only going to push you forward. And also it gave me that tough mindset, because you kind of got knocked down constantly and were like, no, I keep needing to move. So it's both, really. I definitely wish I'd had that. But I do get the questions from a lot of girls, like when they realize what I do, and out of some of the stuff that I've talked about through my local county and things like that, the things that they say when they reach out is, well, how? I didn't have the luxury of having my family involved in motorsports, so I would have absolutely no idea. And so they come to me, and then I sit there and I go, hold on, I never really thought about that. I was lucky. I fell into that in the world of motorsport. I grew up going to rallies as a kid. Like, I used to go watch the RAC with Dad. We'd leave first thing in the morning. I'd go stand in the forest and watch. I'd go to Goodwood like with him every year. And there was always that kind of link with motorsport, because it ran in my family. And my dad had my granddad's old car, and it was always there. It was just never something I thought I could access. So the first thing I have to sit there and go is, wait, actually, if I had absolutely no idea about any of this, how would I get into it? And so I started doing some small bits of research and finding out about how. And then I was like, okay, I think the first things first is go onto the Motorsport UK website. So looked at the Motorsport UK website, tried to look into their grassroots programs. And then obviously, in order to get into any of them, you need those, like the packages to start out in, like the go-kart, I think it's go-kart or go rally. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but they kind of have these things that you order, and you have to go, obviously, either do your bars or your ARDS tests and all of that, and then do the written theory exams and things like that. And I mean, no one wants to do that when they're first starting out. That's not very interesting. I mean, I know it's the necessity, and obviously it's got to be done, but the first thing you don't want to think about is like, I have to do all of this to be able to get to where I want. You want to be able to find a way that then you talked about it, you've kind of gained that knowledge, you have that understanding, and then you're like, yeah, okay, we'll go do that, and we'll do the competition starting. And so I always kind of explain to them, just research as much as you can. I mean, I'll try and help create something eventually that I can be like, here, I have it all listed out for you. But for now, until I've managed that, research is definitely key, and trying to find out. And I do think reaching out to like people like me, people like Molly, and all of those kinds of people, I mean, we are human, we are polite, and we usually I try to respond to like DMs that I have questions and things like that as well. So yeah, reach out to those kinds of people and see, because I was always told as a kid, if you don't ask, the worst you're gonna have, like you'll never know, but the worst you can ever get is a no. So ask.
Yeah, I think that's part of what I've certainly seen as what they call an activator with the women's sports trust, is just trying to network, and how the importance of networking nowadays. So you were talking about social media before. Now you have to have all of the accounts in the world. So you have to be
Yeah.
on Twitter, you have to be on Insta, but Instagram now I think is a really good way of doing things like this.
Yeah.
And then you've got LinkedIn. LinkedIn is kind of key now, isn't it? I think if you want to go and play the game and be able to chat to other people and networks, that's pretty important.
Definitely. It's one of those things that I kind of slept on. To be fair, social media is the kind of thing I've tried really hard, and like I've tried, but like it was never one of those things that I think because I always went into it in the sense of I didn't want to be famous, I wanted to be a rally driver. That's never what I wanted out of it. So it kind of was one of those things I didn't bother thinking about. And then people go, yeah, but you're a role model. You need to be out there. You need to be pushing. And I'm like, it's a lot of extra things to think about. And it's really overwhelming. And so trying to do it yourself, it makes it really hard. But LinkedIn is one of those things I always use to connect with people, like ever since from university, connecting with like potential people to work with, things like that, everything. But I never used it as kind of that social media platform like the rest. So I'm now like trying to play catch up with all of it. But it's always fun. But I did have a chat with a couple people, and they kind of said, do 2 or 3 things well rather than 5 or 6 things poorly. So it's kind of picking and choosing what's going to work best for you and what you can relate more with. Like maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's Twitter. I'm not a Twitter person. I'm not good at that. I find it really hard to be able to put kind of my thoughts down in that little amount, but a picture is a lot easier for me, or a video is it's a lot easier for me. So, and then LinkedIn's a cool one because it's not just about being like social media and intriguing like people as you would within Instagram or Facebook or something like that. It's a completely different market of people. You're trying to reach out to professionals, and professionals who can potentially help you get into different avenues. So yeah, there's so much out there that nowadays, I mean, I make myself sound really old sometimes, but when
Imagine
I
what it's
first
like for
started,
me.
none of this was that important. It was like kind of those things. And I remember I was in uni, I graduated in 2015. So it's not even that long ago, and I did marketing. Marketing was part of my course. And I now look at it and go back, wait, we didn't have social media classes like they do now. Those kinds of things have been useful. But back in like 2011 to 2015, no one was on the bandwagon of social media is going to be a key marketing tool.
Things change really
Yeah.
quickly. Oh dear. So if you had to give one bit of advice to anyone who is watching this, maybe watching the record back as well and thinking, oh, I'm really inspired, I'd love to do what you're doing, what would you say to them to go out and try?
Oh, that's always the hardest thing.
I
I would
know,
say
I mean,
try anything, like anything that gets you in front of or involved in any kind of motorsports or sport. So whatever you're interested in, just kind of find ways to go. If it's local clubs, oh yeah, car clubs, they're really good. Like your local like Southern car clubs and Chelmsford motor clubs and things like that. They're a great way to start because at least you're going to be in front of like-minded people. Do some research into what you're interested in. See if there's anything in the area that might be free to go watch. Just go watch something. Then at least you're again in front of the right people. I did I can't remember what it was called, but just some like it was basically grass auto testing, and it was done in my area, and I sort of just showed up there at the age of 15 and was like, let's see what this is all about. So definitely kind of research and find those ways. And obviously if it's any other sport, go to a game, go to a race. Those are the things that I started doing, and I just found a passion out of that. And you would walk around the service park and you would look around and go, wow, this is super cool. And like you would go like I'm a bit strange. I always find like watching the cars being serviced really interesting, because how can you have like a completely bashed up car to a pretty much running car in 3 hours? It baffles me. So I've always found that super interesting. And if you're interested in mechanics and engineers, I highly recommend going out to watch some of that, because it might create that spark in your mind going, I want to do that in the future.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah,
do need to be part of that world. Make
yeah,
yourself, ingratiate yourself with that world
yeah,
and meet as many people as you possibly can. Nabila, I'm going to let you go. But if anyone's got any questions, if anyone wants to get in touch, then I'm sure now that we all use social media so often, then find Nabila, get in touch with her and see if
yeah,
she can inspire you or you can inspire somebody else, whatever it may be. Network and see where this crazy motorsport world will take you. Nabila, thank you so much for your time. And we've still got lots of work to do, haven't we, to change the world?
yeah, definitely. And
We'll
thanks
get
for
there.
having me. And thanks for all the support
No
over.
problem.
I've learned, it's incredible how much you can learn just like from different people that you meet. And every day I talk to a new person and I learn like 500 things more than I knew the day before. So I think that's the other thing. Constant learning is
Yeah,
important too. Yeah,
for
always be
sure.
open to it.
Never stop learning.
No.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us as well. And I'm sure Nabila and I will link up at some point in the future as well. So keep an eye out. And from both of us, I'll say bye-bye. Bye
Bye.
for now.